Good afternoon, distinguished participants. I think it's time to start. So, yes, thank you for joining 2020 Chuncheon Global Water Forum. I sincerely express thankfulness for your joining at the session, The Perspective of Water Management and Program in the Age of COVID-19 Pandemic Era. Actually, to host this Kinda session, COVID-19 pandemic has advantage or disadvantage. Of course, disadvantage is we are not possible to gather in one place and have a face-to-face connection and great time. But kind of advantage is, even though you are very busy, without visit to Chuncheon, you can join this kind of one place for our discussion and feedback or kinds of opinion sharing. So this is, I think, kinds of, how I can say, something thinking of change to recover this kind of COVID-19 pandemic situation. Okay, so I think everybody, this session, of course, knows each other, but it's better for us to introduce who we are and what we are doing this moment, and something introduction could be better. So I'll turn to you from the presenters, the ton of presenters list, and also I'll give panel in turn for the kinds of introduction turning. So I'll give you Dr. Coral Fernandez Ilecas. Can you introduce?
Yes, hello everyone. And first and foremost, thank you for having me today. I am Coral Fernandez Ilescas, and I am a Principal Water Resources Specialist at Asian Development Bank based in Manila. So it is really my pleasure to be able to be here to discuss some of the work that we have been doing and I've been involved in with JHU Sustain as well in quantifying water security for Asia Pacific, and also, adding on to that the current challenges that we know we're facing in terms of climate change resilience and COVID-19 pandemic resilience. So I look forward to the discussion with you all today, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you. And Dr. Sarwa Choudhury from UNDP Seoul Policy Center.
Yes, thank you. First, thank you for inviting me for this to this webinar, and yeah, really, it's a pleasure that we're able to make it at least virtually. So yeah, I'm Sarwa Choudhury. I manage UNDP's environment program here in South Korea, and I'm also co-leading UNDP's Inclusive Green Economy program in 20 countries. I think Irene is a good partner for UNDP. So again, thank you for invitation and look forward to a good webinar.
Thank you. And Professor Yuichi Ono.
Yeah, good afternoon or morning, everybody. I'm connecting from Sendai, Japan, from Tohoku University. I have been working in this disaster risk reduction field for many years, but I'm not an expert on water or environmental issue. My background is a wind-related disaster like tornadoes and hurricanes and so on. But today, my topic to introduce is COVID-19 related evacuation matter. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Jin Lee from KOICA. 이 과장님.
Mic, please.
Yeah, mic. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon and good morning, all. I'm very pleased to see you, all of you, through our webinar today. I'm Jeremy from SDG, Horticultural team in KOICA, and I'm in charge of all water-related tasks. So I'm happy to present an interesting topic in such a great session. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Vadim Sokolov from IFAS.
Good morning. In Tashkent now it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. So good morning
from Tashkent. I am working for agency of the International Fund for RLC Saving. So the main topic of today's our presentation will be about some activities which still going on to help people around the RLC. So we are very happy, and today also participate my colleague Adham. So we will be today 2 of us, and I am very happy to see all of you and hope that this webinar will be useful for all of us.
Thank you. And Dr. Kejro bin Abdullah from Malaysia.
Very good. Well, it's just about noon in Malaysia, but it's probably one o'clock in Korea. And my good friend Vadim, you are still very early in the morning. So I'm very, very glad to be able to join in this forum because in these days of COVID, this is the only way I get to meet up with all my old friends from all over the world. My name is Kezrul, and I've been involved in water for the last 4 decades in various aspects of water. Presently, I'm the chairperson of Wetlands International office in Malaysia. So I look forward to a very interesting and very lively discussion today, looking at how COVID-19 and its impact on water.
Thank you. And Ms. Yolanda Gomez from the Philippines.
So, good afternoon. Good afternoon from a rainy Manila. The weather is not so good, so my internet connection is quite bad. I'm Yolanda Gomez. I'm from the Philippines. I work in the water sector in the Philippines, but I also work as a partnership facilitator working with water utilities across Asia and the Pacific. So I have to turn off my video, otherwise I will lose you guys.
Yeah, understand. Okay. Okay. And actually, the former advisor to UN Secretary General on Climate Change, Ambassador Mr. Ragon Jung, he has an unexpected situation, so he could not join. And last but not least, our good friend, I'll invite Dr. Hong Il-pyo of KICT.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Hong Il-pyo. I'm working for Korea Institute of Civil Engineering in the Building Technology. I'm covering the climate change adaptation issue and also the disaster risk reduction. And also I'm managing several development cooperation projects in East Asia, also Central Asia. So it's great to see you everybody here, but it's kind of some new normal under the situation of COVID-19. We used to have a very nice group meeting here in Chuncheon for the past 5 and 6 years. So we can, I hope we can see each other face to face very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hong. I think all of you know already myself, but yeah, I'll introduce myself to you too. I'm now managing International Development Corporation Consulting Agency based in Seoul. And we are, of course, specialized in water management and climate change adaptation and water-related disaster management. And we are developing or planning development cooperation programs for this moment, in particular Asia, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia this moment. And yeah, because of pandemic, actually, we had needed to engage or the host kinds of stakeholder engagement meetings at a various level. We should have do that, but because of this pandemic made an impact. So I think all of you had same situation. So yeah, that's kind of the change of this kind of COVID-19 pandemic. So this session will be until 3 p.m. Now 1:15 as Korea Standard Time. So we have 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then I think each presentations will be allocated 15 minutes, and we'll have remaining 30 minutes, around 30 minutes. We will have a panel discussion, including panelists and all the presenters. And I sent the guiding questions to you by mail. So maybe 1 or 2 questions will be asked. I mean, you can choose the questions from question I gave, and then you can freely talk your opinion. So now I'll invite first presenter, Dr. Coral Fernandez-Lecas from Asian Development Bank. And then let's see.
Thank you very much. Would you like me to share my presentation?
Yes, you can do that. Can you see the presentations?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I think I was able to share from mine then.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again for having me today. And today I'm going to be talking to you about water secure and resilient Asia Pacific and how we can address water, climate change, and disaster under the new normal that COVID-19 is. So the first topic I would like to talk about is indeed quantifying water security. And this is something that at Asian Development Bank, we've been doing since 2007. We have been trying to map the water security status of all the countries in Asia Pacific via our signature publication, which is the Asian Water Development Outlook. We have done this effort in 2007, 2013, 2016, and 2020. And what ADO allows us to do, and this is a partnership that is very important to us, and as you can see, we have listed all of the partners at the bottom of the screen, which include OECD, the International Water Management Institute, KICT, and the International Water Center. We are basically quantifying water security throughout its multiple dimensions. So we have on the one hand household water security, or KD1, economic water security, KD2, urban water security, environmental water security, and risk and resilience to water-related disasters. So for each country in Asia Pacific, we go ahead and quantify water security in these 5 dimensions. In addition, in our ADO 2020, what we're doing is actually also looking at the finance and governance aspects of water security. So we have dedicated analysis that have been done in collaboration with OECD for finance and governance aspects of water security throughout the region. And then we also have case studies. And in the case studies, then what we do is how are we at the policy level applying this methodology? And so, for instance, in ADO 2020, we have seen the state of Karnataka in India, for instance, PRC, the Yellow River Basin, Thailand, and Timor-Leste, which have actually used ADO 2020 as part of their policy formulation and implementation. So again, as I mentioned before, this is very important, and it's an exercise that we have been engaged in since 2007, when it all started as a partnership with Asia Pacific Water Forum and ADB. We developed a methodology to quantify national water security, and we have been improving the methodology since. And as I mentioned before, we have certain specific aspects that are new this year, 2020. We hope to launch the publication in December of this year. And one of the most innovative things as well is that we are incorporating a risk framework to our new ADO 2020, which considers indeed climate change and climate change resilience, as well as health in a post-COVID-19 pandemic world. And as well, we're hoping that this is going to be a living policy in action tool. And so we are creating a living ADO website where we hope to have a continuous knowledge and policy discussion. When we look at the kinds of results that we can get from applying ADO 2020 in the region, this shows here is the National Water Security Index for each country in the region. And the way we quantify national water security is by having 5 bands, which takes us from nascent stage in terms of water security to a model stage, which is a 5 in terms of water security. And then so you see the distribution of the National Water Security Index throughout the region. You can obviously see that no country yet has reached the model stage, but there's a majority of the countries in the region, except for Afghanistan, are actually in the process. So they're moving either from an engaged to a capable to an effective stage when it comes to national water security. I would like to make sure that we realize that we're finalizing the publication. So these are our preliminary results, which we're undergoing final verification and may still change in the published version. But this basically gives you a picture of the water security in the region in 2020. Now, what we can tell you as well is from our history of applying the methodology throughout the region is that since 2007, we have seen tremendous progress in terms of water security throughout the region. But of course, we are still a ways from where we would all hope to be, and there's still a lot of work to be done as well. On top of that, we superimpose what we know is the climate change and the effects of climate change. And as UN Water tells us, the water is the primary medium through which we feel the effects of climate change. So then ADB, not only are we quantifying water security, which includes climate change resilience as in ADO 2020, but also what we're also thinking about is how can we mainstream climate change adaptation and water resilience throughout the region by 2030. In order to do that, we're actually engaging in a knowledge production exercise where we really want to understand where we are at the moment in terms of water sector climate change adaptation and mitigation, and how we can, build awareness and capacity for staff and our developing member counterparts so that we can upscale climate change and resilience operations throughout our development member country clients. We also want to make sure we facilitate the preparation and implementation of climate change resilient projects, and that we also produce the necessary knowledge for our region to really move further along the climate change adaptation that we are, aiming for as part of a strategy 2030 and as part of the international commitments that our development member countries have made. So as part of that, not only are we engaged in the production of knowledge around this, but we also want to expand our partnerships, and we also want to expand the external engagement with other partners so that we can use the upcoming important events like the Global Adaptation Summit in 2021 and COP26 in November 2021 to really further the dialogue and the actioning around climate change adaptation. In addition, of course, we are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, and aside from the immediate response where ADB has provided a lot of financial support to our countries in dealing with the short-term effects of the pandemic, we've also reacted internally to provide more of a medium and longer-term response to the realities that COVID-19, has reminded us of, and that is that, we need to work on WASH, on water sanitation and hygiene, not only as an infection prevention control mechanism towards COVID-19, but also more generally as a health promotion strategy. And so when we are hoping to improve health outcomes in the region, we need to upscale the way ADB operations in our DMCs are really incorporating WASH and health more generally. So we're currently undergoing a review of our ADB's program in WASH and health. So not only, as I said, for COVID-19, but other diseases that are like WASH-related diseases through promotion of, improved access to water, sanitation, and hygiene services, and targeting the most vulnerable of communities and populations. So at the same time that we are trying to come up with a strategy to have an integrated approach and to upscale and mainstream the integrated approach, we're also providing financing, courtesy of the government of Japan, for instance, in this case, where we have regional project level grants that are actually helping us strengthening integrated and effective water and health outcomes, but we also have national level proposals to also do this integration. So that is, for instance, one of the things that we are cooperating with the government of Japan with to do. We also are dedicating our own internal resources. For instance, in the Pacific region, we have approved a new project for strengthening this water sanitation and hygiene practices and hygiene behavior change that is fundamental to the post-COVID-19 world. And again, this thinking around the strategy that we need to have a more effective integration of WASH and health is really hoping, for a systemic change inside and with our developing member countries in the way we do ADB operations and programs. We have also internally created a new community of practice and water and health advisory team for knowledge and partnerships. And we hope that this really will be a group of professionals internally at ADB that can provide the necessary knowledge, that can bring in the necessary technical resources when we don't have those, that can facilitate the partnerships necessary to really guide the work of the ADB in terms of WASH and health integration and WASH and health outcomes, and to do this also in the context of further resilience to co-occurring water-related disasters and epidemics. So that is the reality also of the post-COVID-19 world that we have seen, is that we have to be able to respond to co-occurring pandemics and disasters. Also, I think it's important to realize that there are tools out there that can help us respond to disaster risk reduction under the COVID-19 new normal. So as we know, the high experts level panel for disaster risk reduction has a set of principles that include enhancing leaders' awareness, integrating risk management, providing WASH, protecting the scarce medical resources, financing disaster risk reduction actions under COVID-19, and obviously strengthening global solidarity and international cooperation. So ADB has very much aligned itself to be able to respond to disaster risk reduction under the COVID-19 pandemic by following these principles and having specific actions under each of the principles, as clearly mentioned in the slide. So for one of the things that we talked about before, this new water and health advisory team spanning this WASH program, that falls under principle 3 of providing clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. The protecting of scarce medical resources, well, we have provided 48 million technical assistance funds for emergency supplies. Being able to finance disaster risk reduction and COVID-19, we have innovated our contingent disaster financing modality inside ADB so that we can do that. We have provided 20 billion of COVID-19 response in the short term. So we are basically, as you can see here, undertaking a set of actions that clearly indicate the necessity to, on the one hand, work under climate change and adapt to climate change, to be able to reduce disaster risk, and to be able as well to work in the new normal that COVID-19 has brought about. Just to be specific around the kinds of projects that we're now designing, and we consider this a new way of designing projects, is, for instance, proposing a loan on the one hand for integrated urban flood management for the Chennai Kosauthalayar Basin project in India. So that would be a traditional urban flood protection infrastructure project that is upgrading and expanded the capacity for climate resilience in the city. At the same time, we are also approving, courtesy of the Government of Japan Resources, a grant for integrated pandemic and disaster risk management for the urban poor in Chennai. So on the one hand, we are doing the flood protection infrastructure. On the other hand, we're also strengthening WASH services and providing disease prevention training and personal protective equipment in schools, in community health centers, in primary health centers, and in urban low-income communities. So we do, on the one hand, develop the capacity in local authorities and communities to deal with urban flood and urban integrated flood management, but also we improve COVID-19 surveillance and infection prevention and control in these areas that are flood prone and they are urban low-income communities. So this is really a way to do an integrated approach to deal with co-occurring disaster and pandemic. And it also allows us to have planning tools like, response plans to both flood-related disasters and epidemics. So this is really the kind of new normal in terms of project design that ADB is really seen as a way to move forward. And of course, it really very much depends on this ability to come together and work in an intersectoral way and in a multi-partnership manner as well. So part of our strategy too post-COVID-19 is of course this idea of building back better in Asia and the Pacific. So as we mentioned before, to do that, we're taking guidance from the health principles that we mentioned and ADO 2020 to address the current and future crisis. We are, as we mentioned before, reorienting our knowledge, our partnerships of operations for improved WASH, improved health and water-related disaster outcomes. We are changing our policies and financing mechanisms, like the contingent disaster financing, to integrate the health emergency with the water-related disaster response. We are developing new projects, indeed, which have a more integrated approach. And again, also, we have this ability to respond fast to our client needs when every second counts. In terms of the longer term, we're also at the moment defining our water sector framework for the next 10 years. And when we think about the vision for the region, and we come back to ADO 2020 and quantifying water security in the region, we really are thinking, and we're in the processes of finalizing this new strategic sector framework for the next 10 years, that our vision is going to be a water secure and resilient Asia Pacific. And what this really means is that ADB will intensify its support for such a water secure and resilient region. And we're going to do this through inclusive and well-governed and sustainable water services and resource management. So ideally, by doing this, we're really hoping to result in better served, healthier, and more prosperous communities, and to contribute to develop the goals of ADB Strategy 2030, and at the same time support the initiatives that our development member countries have to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, their international commitments, and do this also under conditions of increasing demand and climate uncertainty. So just to give you a visual of what the next 10 years will look like under this sector framework, which is in the final stages of preparation, we're thinking of again, a water secure and resilient Asia Pacific with a few guiding principles that you can see there. And there are 5. And we're thinking that the main principles towards this are going to be building resilience and adaptive capacity on the one hand, promote inclusiveness, embrace sustainability, improve governance, including the catalyzing of finance, and fostering innovation. So we firmly believe that these are the principles that are going to guide us to this. And then we're going to have a set of focal areas of action that are along those principles that we're currently identifying as water as a sustainable resource, universal and safe water services, including obviously water, sanitation, wastewater treatment, and the promotion of the circular economy. Productive water in agriculture and energy, embracing the concept of efficiency, and the reduction of water-related disaster risks. So this is really our thinking. And in order to do this, we're also identifying delivery mechanisms that are very much aligned with the ADB Strategy 2030, which is effective partnerships, expanded private sector operations, and the promotion of knowledge services. So I'd like to finish with some very inspiring words that we recently heard from our Vice President for Knowledge and Management and Sustainable Development, Dr. Bambang Susantono, when he told us all recently that we are now faced with a new normal, as we know, where resources, both public and private, are stretched, where we really need to maximize the impact of every investment we make to save lives and secure livelihoods, and that we need to see COVID-19 and the COVID-19 crisis really as an opportunity to accelerate change and transform our economy using 21st century tools. So I really want to inspire us all, as he said, to build back better, differently, but certainly together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your very comprehensive presentations and explanation and reflection of very fast track of COVID-19 in the comprehensive program, and also ADB strategy for water management according to new normal and kinds of resource mobilization and transition shift this kind of paradigm. And also actually JH sustain with Korea Institute of Civil Engineering and Technology, we involved kind of very long and kind of a very difficult, but anyway, quite meaningful journey to build this kind of Asia Water Development Outlook, and it was really quite a good opportunity for us. So yeah, now the ADO will be launched in November, and yeah, we are really looking forward to kind of final outcome and yeah, sharing with the stakeholders around the world. Thank you. And actually, second presenter is Dr. Sarwat Choudhury, but she sent her updated presentation file just an hour ago, and I couldn't download it. So if possible, may I change the order of a presentation, Dr. Sarwat, if you are all right, or I can download presentation now and can share.
It's up to you. I'm fine either way.
Yes, all right. So yeah, Dr. Sarwat, I'll change the order. You will be last one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, would it be okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, then second presenter will be Professor Yuichi Ono from IRIDES of Tohoku University.
Okay, I'll share my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon and good morning all. I'm not a water expert, or I'm not a COVID-19 expert. I'm not a medical doctor. So what my role is, I'm talking about evacuation during the pandemics, including COVID-19. Our research institute, the IRIDES in Tohoku University, we have about 50 full-time DRR researchers in many fields, earthquakes, typhoons, tsunamis, and so on. Then also economists and social scientists. So we have about 50 full-time. Then 50 part-time researchers and about 100 assistants and helpers. So about 200 people in DRR, all DRR business. Then my role was try to get different experts, including the medical doctors. We have about 5-6 medical doctors who are into the research on the disaster medicine and so on. So I got their inputs too. Then my role was to try to generate a policy outline guidance for this evacuation during the pandemics, because it's becoming a very important issue. We anticipated this issue maybe March and February already, but until we get closer to the rainy season, typhoon season, no practical action has been made. And this has been a problem in Japan and I think other countries, because we didn't experience such a combined disaster with COVID and other disasters together. So the evacuation is becoming a very important and urgent issue to tackle with. So that's the background of my study. So once again, I'm not expert on this area, so my role was to facilitate to make a guideline. We have not had a guideline yet. One thing we did was we reviewed the papers, international papers, and Japanese papers on this issue. There were not many papers on even on this topic. So we made a first the review paper. It is going to be published in the international journal very soon. It was accepted but not released yet. But we have some background. Then top of that, then we try to make this evacuation guideline, not only for Japan, but some other countries. And country by country situations are different. The infrastructure, and social system, and political system even are different. So we wanted to share some of the key elements which can be adapted in other countries. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. Okay. Well, evacuations. On the disaster, we evacuate. And earthquake situation or tsunami or even accidents with airplane accidents, when the airplane landed over sea or over land, we have evacuation guidelines. Then in case of fire, we know what to do. So this is something already existing. And for the disaster evacuation, some cases, many people are gathered in an evacuation center, which can be a gymnasium of the school buildings or some churches and religious gathering places or a stadium and so on. The thing is, under these situations, what we are afraid now is COVID-19. We don't want to be close to many people. So this is a challenge. Then if not evacuating to this kind of evacuation center, traditional evacuation centers, what we should do. So this is some guiding question. So then before that, when we think about evacuation, well, nobody wants to evacuate if you are already in a safe place. So evacuation, we might have to do evacuation, but it would be best if we don't have to evacuate. So this is the first point. So no one wants to evacuate if not needed. So it would be best if you don't have to evacuate. So when we search for a place to live, or when we try to build a house or office or a business, the best thing is to know the risk of the hazard on that location. So we don't want to place ourselves into the risky area if possible. But in a practical cases, many people live in a risky area. In Japan, only maybe 10%, 20% of the land are flat area, and that flat area is almost always alluvial plain, the flat plain. So we cannot separate ourselves from the flat plain living in. So this is a challenge. Then strictly speaking, we should all live in houses where we don't have to evacuate, but the reality is not. Then people evacuate houses, offices, train stations, airports, many places, even countries, etc. in a case of impending disaster risk. So this is a current situation. The source of disaster risk differ. Can be an explosion, animal attacks. Doesn't have to be a natural hazard, natural disaster, but accident, technical failure, like a Fukushima problem and so on. The wars and conflict, that's people evacuate from there, or the politically made evacuees and so on. So there are many sources. Then evacuate because something causes damage on you or your property. So in case you keep staying in the place where you are. So people want to avoid evacuation as much as possible. This is a natural thing to do. But the question is where to evacuate. So if you have to evacuate, where to evacuate? That's very important to identify. To a safer place, of course, safer place. Anywhere safer place. There's no safest place, perfectly safe place. So people choose to evacuate to a safer place. It can be hotels, your neighbor's house, relative's house, friend's house, or designated evacuation centers, like a traditional evacuation centers, or some people go to tents, or some people evacuate in the vehicles and so on. Then the duration also does matter. How long people have to evacuate. In case of fire, maybe just maybe few hours. But in case of an earthquake, big earthquakes, you may have to stay in the evacuation area for weeks and maybe a month and so on. So depending on the disaster, depending on the kinds of disaster, the duration of the evacuation also differs. Where to go is also differs. So it's not simple to talk about the evacuation. I'm talking about one specific case happened in Japan recently. On 6th of September this year, the typhoons were approaching from South Ocean to Western Japan towards Korean Peninsula. Actually, Korean Peninsula got hit by typhoons several times this year. And one of them was very close to Western Island, Kyushu. Then a total number of evacuation orders were made for 8.5 million people at one moment. So 8.5 million. Where to go those people? Where to evacuate those people? It is impossible to evacuate everybody. Although the municipalities made evacuation orders for this big number of people, that people couldn't evacuate. Most people didn't go anywhere. Most people stayed in home. One, there's no enough space. Two, the COVID-19. The people tend to not to evacuate to massive evacuation places and so on. Then the accepting people, the evacuation center manager, they could not accommodate people as before because of the COVID. So the accommodation, the ratio was reduced to 30% to only 25% of the original people because they need to keep social distance. So they could not accept as many people as before. So the result is not enough people are able to evacuate. But the question is, should people hesitate to evacuate because of the COVID-19? So this was raised the question. The answer is no. Luckily, there's not many big disaster. It didn't turn out to be a big disaster in case of this typhoon. The prediction was a little bit wrong. I mean, what happened was the cold air was coming from the north to weaken a little bit the typhoon strength. The meteorological agency was analyzing the previous warning was very high level, highest level of warning, but it was a bit downgraded due to the cold air coming into the this system of a typhoon. So luckily, this typhoon was not as strong as expected. So not many people were suffered from this typhoon, but evacuation ratio of people evacuating was very small. So the again, question was people should evacuate or not. But you know, it was lucky, but it turned out to be a different way. It could have been very worse. So it was just luck, and the evacuation should be prioritized over the COVID-19 or other immediate pandemic epidemic. This is, I think, the truth that if worst case, many people would die. If not evacuating, people maybe suffer in flooding and so on. So I think we think it should prioritize the immediate risks in front of you rather than the COVID-19 or other epidemics. Then here, I'm talking about the ways of evacuations, the dispersed evacuation. First, if you live in a safe place, you don't need to evacuate. That's fine. Then every household should understand the risk of a place you live. There is a hazard map. There's information on the risk around you. The local government, or they may provide some information on it, but not many people understand the risk of where you live, exactly the building you live. That information is not easy to get. I moved to Sendai 8 years ago. Then my apartment provided by the university housing. I tried to understand the risk where I live. What about flood risk? What about earthquake risk and so on? I'm an expert on DRR, but it was very difficult for me to get that information, accurate information. So I think many people don't know the risk of where you are right now. What is the risk of it? So I think it's very important to know pinpointed area risk assessment on where you live. Otherwise, people would wonder whether whether people should evacuate or should not evacuate. So this is important to know where the risk of not your town but your house, your building where you're located. Then after that, second, you do not always have to go to the nearest evacuation centers. Well, when the evacuation orders are issued, people may think immediately to go to the evacuation center, but it's not true. If you are living in a safe area, if you know your place living is safe already, then you don't need to evacuate, although evacuation orders are made. So that's reducing the number of people who would go to the evacuation centers. So the thing is, think of alternatives where you can avoid crowds. If you have to evacuate, you don't straight to go to the evacuation centers. It could be your friend's house. It could be your, other places like hotels or even the vehicles. If the vehicles, they're parking the car in a safer area, that may be a good place because you don't need to mix with other people if you're evacuating within a car. Although the cars needs to be safe against the strong wind and so on, but the cars can be one option if that is not risky. Or hotels or other places. Then maybe last resort would be to go to evacuation centers. That's maybe a way of thinking and maybe new normal. People don't have to go to evacuation center immediately. You need to think about the options where you evacuate. So needs of a new guideline. We are developing a new guideline with a simple flow chart. So that people can understand. Flow chart would be a good tool. So we are working on it, assisted by the expert, including the infectious disease expert in our institute. Then we first try to make it in Japanese and English. Then this can be translated to other Asian languages. We are working together with the Typhoon Committee member countries and 12 countries in Asia. So we are first try to share the original things with translated version with them and disaster managers. And we also working with UNDP. So UNDP colleagues in Asia Pacific they are also looking at it, and maybe we work on it together. Then we are sharing these items through our web page and so on. So we are now making on it, and by the end of this year, maybe by December, we will try to launch it, share this with colleagues. So evacuation with COVID-19, I think many governments are doing similar things, but this is case of Japan, and I think some cases from Philippines. So these are the tents within the evacuation center. This can be avoiding the facing with, trying to keep the social distance. Some people evacuate to the vehicles, as I said. The vehicles like upper chat, they make a special kind of a vehicle. Within a vehicle, you can depart, separate people. Like this car, maybe 2 adults can sleep, and another child can fit in this car, and like this. And but cars need to be parked in the safe places, so that if the cars are parked in a risky area, it's not a good thing. So evacuation centers, maybe the cars can be parked at the evacuation centers and so on. But anyway, the dispersed evacuation may be a key to reduce the number of people rushing to the evacuation centers. So we may do it by hazard, but if it is too complicated, we will just simplify against one typical hazard, maybe typhoons or floods. And so I will stop my presentation, and thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you, Professor Ono. So yes, actually, yeah, this is, I also saw kind of news because of flooding in India or Bangladesh. The people should evacuate for shelter or some kinds of particular place, but it was not possible because of this pandemic. Normal evacuation was not allowed. So they have a big problem, and I think, of course, Japan and of course all the countries had the same problem. So yeah, this one needs to be prioritized in the era of COVID pandemic for disaster management. And if there is any question after presentations or the panel discussion, kind of question will be followed. And may I invite third presenter, Ms. Jean Lee from KOICA.
Yes, today I want to share with you the new prospect of KOICA water program after COVID-19. I deliver about 5 contents in my presentation. At first, I will briefly review the status of support in the water sector of DAC members through water-related ODA statistics. After that, I will talk about KOICA support for the water sector and explain midterm strategies and program in the water sector. And after talking about today's topic, the post-COVID-19 development agenda, and I would like to conclude. But I think maybe you are a little bit boring because there is a lot about statistics, but let's get started. I have drawn the graph you can see now with the OECD DAC statistics. As you may know, the 140 CRS code is the number of all projects related to water and sanitation. Through this graph, DAC members were able to see how much they are applying to the water sector when compared to the entire sector. The figure is below about 7%. These results are said to have been around 6 to 7% of support since 2020. So according to the OECD DAC statistics, Korea's position in the global water and sanitation sector is as follows. Support the performance of water and sanitation sector in Korea is ranked 8th followed by Japan, Germany, US, France, Netherlands, and Sweden. Actually, as of 2013, Korea was ranked fourth. Unfortunately, 5 years later, water sector ODA disbursement has fallen a little bit. These results show the same patterns as the total amount of disbursement, which is believed to be linked to the government policy stance. We can see that water supply and sanitation large system is the highest by looking at the CRS 1.0 code support status of DAC members for 4 years. And only water supply large system has followed. One interesting here is that if you look at the 2018 graph, support is increasing all subsectors. So in particular, basic drinking water and basic sanitation, brown bar, have increased significantly. And it can see that disbursement has also increased significantly for disaster management, such as DRR, Sky Blue Bar, and DPP, Yellow Bar. I want to see more about disaster management commitment. The CRS codes for disaster management are 0 to 0 DPP. DRR is disaster risk reduction, and DPP is the disaster prevention and preparedness. Of course, these codes are not just water related, included for all other disasters, but water related disaster has been included as a very large portion in the disaster area. So the members are supporting more to DPP than to DRR. And the figure is about 1.5% of total ODA disbursement. On the other hand, KOICA is providing support at about 1 to 1.3%. This slide is very familiar to those of you, so I will skip it. SDG is striving to achieve the goal of solving water problem with subdivided goals related to water. In addition, SDG 6 target is related to various strong direct or indirect target within sustainable development goals. From here on, I would like to talk about KOICA's contribution. So KOICA's total ODA budget have been increased steadily since 2013. Next year marks the 30th anniversary of KOICA's opening. So in the next year, KOICA is expecting a total budget about $1 billion in ODA. KOICA has implemented projects for supporting development countries in various sectors. Importantly, we are providing such support in various form and size to address water-related issues. For example, we are engaging in a project to develop drinking water in villages through cooperation with NGO. Also, we are carrying out a project to develop agricultural water and irrigation channels that direct affect food security. Other forms of support include a master plan project to prevent natural disaster, a natural disaster and project to conduct a large water supply and drainage systems. KOICA has provided planning, such as master plan for developing country, considering priority of those status development strategies. And those plans did not necessarily guarantee instant implementation of project, which is a mostly huge-scale infrastructure because of the insufficiency of the national budget. Currently, KOICA is working hard to solve this problem and trying to integrate the big plan and actual project by facilitating financial support and available funds by other multilateral financing organizations. So KOICA has increased the amount of support in the water sector until 2014, and thereafter has shown a similar trend in the amount of support every year. So in fact, there is a slight downward trend from 2016. As I mentioned, I think it's the result of the government policy. So, however, the fact that it maintains about 6.5% of the total amount of ODA disbursement, like the DAC members, has important implications. We provided support mainly to Africa during the 90s. However, our support has been increasingly focused on Asian regions, Eastern Europe, and CIS since the late 2000s. Our water-related support projects are no longer confined to developing water supply system and improving water facilities. They are now being diversified into various subsectors, including integrated water resources management, water pollution treatment, and water-related disaster management. Such diversification is a result of taking into account geographical features, national development levels, and regional situations. This slide, KOICA has established 10 strategies for each sector in 2015 and is planning project according to the strategies. In particular, KOICA's midterm water strategy have been creating programs and projects with the following themes for 5 from 2016 to 2020. I would like to briefly introduce the water strategy ending this year. KOICA's vision and mission for water as follows. KOICA has 3 strategic themes, and they are the same for strategies to be updated after 2020. However, there will be some changes in the main strategic structures. The first strategic objective is succeed to wash, which has been emphasized by MDG. However, KOICA intends to focus a little more on a subsector such as water and sanitation large system. For example, water supply and drainage system plant project, not basic drinking water supply. The second strategic objective is water resources management. This is also a regime newly introduced in the SDG frame. In line with this, KOICA is focusing on water resources management for food and energy security. The third strategic objective is water-related disaster management. The goal is connected with the Sendai framework, which is water-related disaster reduction. These are managed by KOICA's own strategic indicators, which are slightly different from the SDG target indicators. Yes, if this right. Yes. The ongoing COVID-19 outbreak pandemic is now a global crisis. The COVID-19 crisis has affected all aspects of everyday life and work, and heavily impacted the global economy. This crisis also offers insights into how the global climate crisis may be managed, as there are many parallels between the COVID-19 crisis and what we expect from the imminent global climate emergency. Reflecting upon the challenges of today's crisis may help us better prepare for the future. The ongoing COVID-19 outbreak pandemic, COVID-19 crisis has affected all. This crisis also offers insight into how the global climate crisis may be managed. Here we combined a list of similarity and differences between the two crises and the lessons we can learn from them. High momentum trends, irreversible changes, social and spatial inequality, weakening of international solidarity, and less cost to prevent than to cure. Dr. Rubin said in his papers that the expansion dynamics of the virus and difficult for human to grasp owing to its long incubation period and its exponential growth, making pandemic crisis management extremely difficult. In a similar way, climate change also has a complex but even slower temporal dimension. Such cases, the crisis may only become obvious when it's too late to prevent it. It can be said that the primary outbreak COVID-19 is caused by climate change. The appearance of virus is caused by the destruction of the ecosystem balance, and the imbalance is caused by climate change. As such, COICA will respond to global crises such as the pandemic and climate crisis with the current water strategy. Of course, current strategic objectives were optimal for solving water problem even before COVID-19. Once again, COVID-19 reminds us that water resources is essential. In order to prevent infectious disease, we need more hand washing water. In order to secure scarce water, efficient use and management of water is essential. Same as less costly to prevent than to cure, more important to prepare than to recover from the disaster. With COVID-19, we have three implications. First, we need to change the value and awareness of water. Water is preventive medicine and remedial agent and economic goods, I think. Second, we need to secure sustainable resilience through intelligent information and digitization in the water sector. It is to apply the pandemic response process, prevent, detect, response to the water sector. And finally, we need to prepare a scenario for responding to multi-hazard risk disasters. After a disaster, these scenarios are important to solve various problems, such as waterborne disease, the rise of the poor by social distancing, and bias information and support. All of these things need to be considered and tailored support for each developing country's status while carrying out ODA project. The pandemic issue calls for a new paradigm of contact-free process in future international development cooperations. We must establish a contact-free project to program discovering, planning, implementing, and managing system. The pandemic issue is particularly affected by the level of water management and the status of basic infrastructure. So the water sector strategies must be complemented. Mostly important after COVID-19, there will be concentrated support from the health and sanitation, such as WASH. This can lead to huge losses of both life and property in the event of water-related disaster caused by the climate crisis in developing countries. So we must develop water project in balanced way. Yes, that's all. So that conclude my talk. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, June. Very comprehensive presentation to show kind of new normal Korea vision, KOICA vision, and water planning and strategy. And actually, I asked her kinds of a more, how I can say, new directive of KOICA program direction under the COVID-19 pandemic. So she really especially collected all the kinds of state-of-art data and material, and she made that kinds of statistic data just a few days ago. So it's really, really new information. So very much appreciate about that. And then, yeah, she's the only water advisor in KOICA. So, I mean, she has quite big power for all the developing countries. So, yeah, we need to make a good relation about that. Yeah, that's kind of kidding, but yeah, she's very, she's important person to handle and plan water program in Korea. Yeah, and now I'll invite Dr. Vadim Sokolov from IFAS. So, yeah, he's sharing his presentation this moment.
Sorry, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can see.
Yes.
Okay. So, again, my presentation is about some new steps forward to our activity around the RLC crisis. You very well know about what is happening with the RLC. During last 50 years, we lost this water body as a single, one of the biggest in the world, intercontinental inland lake. And instead, we have a huge desert. Only today, we can see only a few remaining water bodies, and some of water bodies we started to create in the southern part of RLC zone. And today we have, instead of sea, about 5 million hectares of saline desert, of which more than 3.3 million hectares located on territory of Uzbekistan. And of course, this crisis created a lot of negative challenges to humanity and ecosystems. From this desert, the wind created a lot of salt and dusty storms. It's influential to human health. We observe increasing of many diseases among the people who are living in this area. Also, we observe a huge loss of biodiversity in terms of fauna. We lost many plants which were growing here, loss of population of wild animals. Also, we completely, RLC was lost as a fishery industry, for transport, and people who are living in this area lost a lot of opportunity for good job and their welfare. In 2018, together with United Nations office in Uzbekistan, we did some kind of observation. What is the real situation and what the local people are thinking about the problems. And here in this slide, I show the 7 problems which were raised by the local people. And for me, it was a very big surprise, because we always were thinking that water problem is one of the biggest. But as you can see from this slide, water is only on the 6th place, because during these 50 years, during this crisis increased, people were more or less, how to say, became more suitable to these problems. And at the first place, of course, this is the employment. Second place, this is environmental situation and the impact of this salt and dusty storms. Loss of transport infrastructure in this area, because desert always creates, how to say, impact to all basic infrastructure. Also, people very dissatisfied by the provision of medical services, loss of deficit of pharmacology, and high cost of medicine, because modern drugs, medical drugs coming here, transportation is very, very costly. And as I mentioned, that also one of the problem is education service, very high tariffs for education, and very poor capacities for kindergartens facilities and their capacities. And again, as I already mentioned, only at the 6th place, people put the water drinking supply issues. And also communal housing services, also one of the issue which local people raised. So our government, not only our government, but also our neighbors, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, which also impacted by the crisis of RLC, but also our upstream neighbors from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are very worried about the situation. And 27 years ago, it was established International Fund for RLC Saving. Also, we attract a lot of attention and support from World Society. UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres visited us in 2017, and his previous boss, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he visited also this region in 2010. Our president in 2017 from the tribune of United Nations in New York also demonstrated this map of remaining parts of RLC, addressing to the people that our countries could not solve the problems of RLC themselves, and we need international efforts and consolidation of efforts to solve the problems. And in August 2014, there was a summit of IFAS, International Fund for RLC Saving, in Turkmenistan. And our president during the summit suggested a new initiative to declare RLC zone a zone of environmental innovations and technologies. And as you know, in September this year, it was 75th anniversary session of General Assembly of United Nations. And again, due to COVID pandemic, these debates were organized in online regime, and our president on 23rd of September again had a speech during these debates, and among other 10 issues, very important issues for the global process and regional process, again he remembered about RLC crisis, and he asked the United Nations to adopt a special resolution of United Nations to support declaration of the RLC region as a zone of environmental innovations and technologies. And by this offer, we hope that UN resolution will help us to attract more international assistance to the countries of Central Asia, especially to strengthen our cooperation, addressing to solution of the problems, environmental problems and problems with water, because one of the main problem is water saving program, which will allow us.
Excuse me, Vadim. Are your slide, you're talking in your first presentation slide, or you're passing your slides this moment? Because now the screen.
You cannot see the slides?
Yeah, now the screen just showing first one. Yeah, right. Yeah, now it's operating well. Yeah.
So again, as I told that in September, our president asked the United Nations to support this new resolution, and the main objective of this concept to declare the zone of RLC as a zone of ecological innovations is transform the zone of ecological crisis associated with drying of RLC into a zone of social economic development through introduction of environmental innovations and technologies. And this concept, our concept, cover the whole Central Asia, taking into account a common regional approach to implementing measures in the RLC basin. Mostly it's related to water saving technologies, and allocate more water for solution of the problems exactly in the zone which is more close to RLC. Also, this resolution is a proper mechanism for implementation of some international conventions and international processes, such as Paris Agreement on Climate Change, Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction, and by this, we hope that we will move more forward to solve the biggest problems related to RLC. And also, last year, Uzbek government adopted a special program addressing to transition to green economy, and it was adopted a special action plan, which we see that our concept of RLC as a zone of innovations exactly will be one of the mechanisms of implementation our movement towards the green economy. And I think that we can looking forward to join us Korean institution. A special thanks to KOICA, which provide some support for a number of projects in Uzbekistan and in the RLC zone. And I hope that all recommendations which we will listen already today from the some presentations will be from ADB, from UNESCO and others, will be very valuable for our way towards this solution of RLC problem. So thank you, and we are looking for more close cooperation in spite of this pandemic.
Thank you, Vadim. Yes, actually, maybe around 15 years ago, we had a close partnership with Uzbekistan in the Development Cooperation Program and also water advocacy through the activities of World Water Council, through activities of World Water Forum. And now through KOICA, we got some funded for making Uzbekistan ICT-based water management information system building, and also building master plan of integrated, the overall water resources management plan. So that kind of the bilateral cooperation and multilateral cooperation through ADB or the UN or agencies, we are now in the different perspective, different place, and we have a kind of various direction with each institution's direction and perspective. And this kind of sharing place is a very, I think, good opportunity and to follow up, and we can find opportunity to how to motivate and facilitate our cooperation in this kind of unexpected situation. And yeah, I need to little time to share screen for Dr. Sarwat Chaudhry's presentation. So I can give you maybe 2 or 3 minutes break to bring your tea or coffee, and then please come back. And I'll prepare for the share screening for her presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yes, so yeah, I'm Sarwat Chaudhry. I work at UNDP Seoul Policy Center, and thank you, Irene, for sharing the slides. So let's go into them right away. So as we have been speaking, the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic actually affected the world in unprecedented ways, from the enormous health challenge to a major slowdown in the world economy, which is also jeopardizing the lives and livelihoods of millions of people. And as we are seeing in different countries, governments are taking aggressive steps to contain and control the spread of virus through social distancing, testing, and contact tracing. And it's been well established that the major pathway for transmission is human-to-human contact, also human contact with infected surfaces. So a critical element of successful virus containment must include frequent hand washing with soap and water. And my title slide actually shows a picture from UNDP Bangladesh on this. So Irene, if we can go to the next slide. So so that in this second slide, the importance of safe water, sanitation, and hygiene to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was recognized as at the UN Sustainable Development Goal 6, and especially Goal 6, under Goal 6, Target 6.1, 6.2, and also SDG Target 1.4 on equal rights to resources and basic services. So water, sanitation, and other basic services are key for reducing poverty and inequality. So UNDP has numerous interventions and programs to support the improved delivery and access to basic services, for creating the basis for more equitable and sustainable management of water and other natural resources. Let me illustrate. So the Global Water and Ocean Governance Program, WOGP, oversees a range of such initiatives, including water governance support at local and national levels, essentially through the Goal Waters and previously Goal Wash program, with support from the government of Sweden, and also in cooperation with water quality and ecosystems management at the transboundary level, mostly from the GEF funding. Also on the ground, the climate change adaptation portfolio plays an active role in helping countries improve access to safely manage water, sanitation, and hygiene. and especially so in a set of small island developing states, SEEDS countries. So let's go to the next slide, please. So SDG 6 targets that I just referred to, SDG 6, target 6.1 is by 2030 achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. And 6.2 is achieving access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and also ending open defecation, paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. So based on the latest estimates by WHO and UNICEF's joint monitoring program, 3 billion people don't have access to soap and water at home. Also, 900 million children don't have soap and water at school. And 40% of healthcare facilities were not equipped to practice hand hygiene. So there are also large inequalities between and within countries, with some population having extremely low coverage of this basic and vital amenity. Now, in terms of specific examples, more than 400 million people in rural area India have limited household hygiene facilities, while 40 million people in rural areas of the DRC Congo have no hygiene facilities at all. 100% of rural Gambians have no household hygiene facilities. So globally, 36% of schools have no hygiene services. In Yemen, it's 84%. So these numbers kind of shows the severity of the challenge that's facing us. Next, let's go to the next slide. So water, sanitation, and hygiene, WASH. So while substantial progress has been made in increasing access to clean drinking water and sanitation, billions of people, mostly in rural areas, still lack these basic services. And the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated the critical importance of sanitation, hygiene, and adequate access to clean water for preventing and containing diseases. Hand hygiene saves lives. As I mentioned before, and also according to WHO, hand washing is one of the most effective actions we can take to reduce the spread of pathogen and prevent infections. But as we know, billions of people still lack safe water sanitation, and funding is also inadequate. Even before COVID-19, gaps in access to hygiene services and safely managed drinking water and sanitation services were causing massive harm to people's health, education, and economic opportunities in many parts of the developing world. The lack leads to increased incidences of waterborne diseases, particularly diarrhea, which killed about 830,000 people in 2016. So diseases like these are also keeping millions of children out of school and diminish women's opportunities to create new economic enterprises. Overall, it's estimated that even before COVID-19, inadequate hand hygiene resulted in nearly 300,000 deaths per year, with majority of deaths come among children younger than 5. So let's go to the next slide. So UNDP's Water and Ocean Governance Program works in over 150 countries, providing policy support, capacity building, and advisory services in a range of strategic areas, including water supply and sanitation, especially in the context of a changing climate, integrated water resources management, regional and global cooperation, and cooperation in transboundary water basins. So the water governance support also integrates cross-cutting issues into its broad thematic work. So climate change has become an overarching theme and the lens through which all the work is currently conducted. The human rights-based approach, HRBA, which sees all people as active participants with rights to their own development. Also inclusiveness, making specific efforts to include marginalized communities. For example, indigenous people who are critical for the sustainable management of many environmental resources, yet are often disadvantaged in the control of those resources. mainstreaming of gender into water. It's also a critical component of combating inequality throughout the society. And the other aspects include knowledge management, learning from experience, and the fostering of South-South and triangular cooperation, especially as we see in Korea, and exchange of experience. And also the last one I wanted to highlight is integrity by way of knowledgeable professionals, transparency, accountability, and participation. Corruption tends to be reduced and leading to more effective policy in implementation and goals achievement. So let's go to the next slide. This is about goals waters. So the UNDP program for governance, accountability, and learning for water sustainability, Goal Waters, promotes the sustainable use and protection of fresh water and coastal resources through strengthened national and local governance. So this mechanism provides flexible support to national and local authorities and partners in support of the 2030 agenda with an emphasis on water and ocean goals. It builds on the much appreciated gap filling approach of the predecessor mechanism as a Goal Wash program. So overall, for UNDP's water vision, equity and efficiency remains key. And this also includes, as you can see, the three sequential areas: integrated climate resilient, sustainable, inclusive management of water and ocean resources, equitable access to benefits and services through improved water and ocean governance. And the sequential areas include identifying the gaps, needs, constraints, and opportunities in national water and sustainable sanitation plan, strategies and capacity, supporting development and reform of action plans, policies, laws, coordinative mechanisms, and regulatory functions, and also supporting the implementation with accountability and transparency. So these activities are implemented through UNDP's country offices and partners, with backstopping and strategic thematic support provided by UNDP CIWI Water Governance Facility, which is hosted by the Stockholm International Water Institute. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a map of the recently completed Goal Wash support. And in addition to achieving the intended results, the program had added benefits and synergies and helped leverage an additional $63 million. So suggesting that for every dollar invested in a Goal Wash project, another $16 was leveraged from other organizations, donors, and governments. For example, in Togo, Goal Wash supported a study and a roadmap to improve drinking water systems in small towns. Following the development of these documents, the government of Togo committed the investment of $23 million to improve water systems in small semi-urban areas. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. So Goal Water activities, as I mentioned, throughout strengthened governance and management frameworks and processes, Goal Waters aims at contributing to more sustainable planning, allocation, use and protection of water, coastal and marine resources in cities, river basins, coastal and marine areas. And also to ensure use and protection of fresh water and coastal resources in ways that benefit the livelihoods of vulnerable peoples and small-scale food producers. So it's currently active in 10 countries, including drought management in Jordan, with managed groundwater recharge in Azra Basin, and also stakeholder consultation for water code revision in the Comoros, ensuring the wider participation of actors on the various islands. So these are just two examples of Goal Waters. So let's go to the next slide. So there is support for enhancing local water governance in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam, and the inclusion of water consideration into Nigeria's nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. speakers have already referred to the Paris Agreement before this. So the mechanism actually enables work on freshwater and coastal resources management to be carried out from the entry point of human rights, gender, integrity, biodiversity, climate change, and or disaster risk reduction. Okay, and then we will go to the next slide. So achievements and progress are all depending upon capable individuals, groups, institutions at local level. And so that this is kind of the focus of CAPNet. This is UNDP's International Capacity Development Network for Sustainable Water Management. It's composed of 23 affiliated networks and some 40 plus international partners. So the networks are autonomous associations of experts and organizations that have emerged globally as a strategic response to the demand for increased skills and capacity in water management. So most trainings are geared toward enhancing the implementation of integrated water resource management beyond addressing a set of technical consideration related to wastewater management or solar pumping. The CAPNet learning resources also incorporate the cross-cutting issues, for example, climate change adaptation, gender equality, HRBA human rights-based approach, working with indigenous people. So during these challenging times of COVID-19, the refurbishment of CAPNet's virtual campus has been very timely, as I heard from my colleagues. So through this online tool for learning global courses and webinars can be managed in today's increasingly virtual world that we are all experiencing. So this CAPNet program is implemented in collaboration with the Global Water Partnership, which hosts the CAPNet Secretariat. Then I have a few slides on climate change adaptation. So our signature program, I won't read through them. You can see the climate change adaptation signature programs in 5 areas. Let me highlight here that UNDP and our partners are helping governments to find solutions for an environmentally sustainable, climate sensitive, and long-lasting recovery. And we are scaling up the ambition of climate actions through ecosystem-based approaches, support to farmers to ensure resilient food and agriculture practices, expanded climate services, and early warning systems, and other climate change adaptation solutions that support countries in accelerating the ambition for their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement, and also realizing the SDGs. So we have this Climate Promise program where we are supporting around 100 countries in expanding the ambition of their climate actions. And then the next slide is talking about financing of climate change adaptation work. Well, we help countries secure climate change finance that's available to vertical funds. For example, Adaptation Fund, the LDC, Least Developed Countries Fund, the Special Climate Change Fund, which are both of which are managed by the Global Environment Facility, also the Green Climate Fund, and also other multilateral and bilateral sources. And UNDP supports countries to optimize the use of these public funds by also leveraging and catalyzing private finance for adaptation. And let me here also mention that working with partners in national governments, the UN system, donors, civil society, and UNDP is leading with these partners in the socioeconomic recovery work from the COVID-19 pandemic. This ongoing and accelerated support is happening through the UNDP Climate Promise that I mentioned, NDCs to the Paris Agreement, and also government-driven solutions that are allowing for a resilient recovery from the global humanitarian crisis, this pandemic. And at the same time, ensuring a climate-smart, resilient recovery. For example, in Somaliland and Colombia, water programs are ensuring access to safe water. Farmers also across the globe, as if we see, are transforming the way they produce crops to deal with the multiplying threats from the pandemic and climate change. And communities are coming together to provide healthcare workers with personal protective equipment, PPE, for example, in places like Sri Lanka. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Here, in terms of preserving and restoring natural ecosystems that can provide cost-effective protection against climate change, Our main areas of work include ecosystem restoration and conservation. These are soft measures, management of coastal, riverine, and freshwater ecosystem protections, again, climate change, threats, again, soft measures, and also sustainable land management through reforestation, restoration land, and also establishment of protected land and manage marine areas. Okay, next slide, please. Here we are talking about promoted integrated and ecosystem-based climate resilient management of the rivers and lakes and oceans of the world. And main areas of work include watershed management, catchment rehabilitation, sustainable land management, improving access to drinking water and water for domestic usage, coastline protection through soft and hard measures, and promoting integrated water resource management system. This slide, I talk about climate community-based adaptation as an important, sorry, this is the next slide, Irene. So this, in this slide is about the community-based adaptation as an important component of the larger picture of management and avoidance of climate change impacts and pressures by the local populations. It provides information and concrete examples on potential impacts of climate change and mitigation measures, which are location specific and community managed. One example that I was planning to highlight is Nepal's mountain ranges. Climate change is driving more intense monsoon rainfall and increasing snow and glacier melts. And through a project on safeguarding vulnerable communities and their assets from climate change induced disasters, we are applying long-term and multi-hazard approach with the particular stewardship of women and marginalized communities in focusing on Nepal's watersheds. And I think we can, I can share more information on this if you're interested. This is like the last, just almost last slide. So here I wanted to also acknowledge my colleagues, because I'm not a water sector expert. So this PowerPoint, in this slide, I would like to acknowledge the colleagues who have supported with resources and materials. Andrew Hudson, who is a technical advisor of UNDP and water resources based in New York, and also my colleague Marianne Kallen, senior water advisor for UNDP, and my colleague Noor Seshiaida, she is based in Seoul's Policy Center. Okay, and then let's go to the last slide. This is my thank you slide with my email address if you have any questions. So I can connect you with other colleagues as well. But as I was trying to say, UNDP through programs such as GoWash and its climate change adaptation portfolio and programs play an active role in helping countries improve access to safely manage water, sanitation, and hygiene. And I hope the slides were useful. Also, just wanted to highlight that in recognition of the critical importance of hand washing, both to prevent COVID-19 and to reduce the global burden of death, disease, and lost socioeconomic opportunity, and achieving the SDG target 6.1, 6.2, the Sanitation and Water for All partnership has called a leadership call for action, which calls leaders everywhere to provide water, sanitation, and hygiene to all without discrimination, ensure that systems supporting them are resilient, and above all, provide the financing to do this in a sustainable way. And this has been signed by heads of state, presidents of regional development banks, heads of international NGOs, different companies, CEOs, also heads of various UN agencies, including the head of UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner. So tangible follow-up on the call to action will not only play a major role in containing COVID-19 and possible future pandemics, but by bringing safe water, sanitation, and hygiene to communities and schools around the world, could help catalyze a measurable leap in sustainable human development and progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. So yeah, I would like to end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarwat. Yeah, new perspective and recent trend of UNDP program. And I'm personally more interested and focused on kinds of a cross-cutting perspective is becoming more important and important. Yeah, kind of wash hygiene society is really closely linked with community and gender equality or partnership, something like that. And also health issues is, of course, it was important before, but it's more becoming important. So how we can make that kind of coalition program among different sectors to make align with our various direction. Yeah, that was my impression. Thank you. So now, wow, now almost 3. Well, I failed time management. So yes, may I invite Dr. Kejro? Yeah, you can have your opinion and questions for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Irene. I prepared some slides which I thought would be useful for people to follow because English is not our mother tongue. What I've done is I've looked at your question 3, looking at the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And as we all know, COVID-19 pandemic has incurred very great impact on our social economy. On the social side, it is the poor people, the elderly, the vulnerable who are disproportionately affected. And it's because they have lack of access to health care. At the same time, they have little or no access to clean water. On the economic side, you know, the global economy, every country is recording drops in GDP. But it's actually at the local community level. Because of the lockdown, many people have lost jobs and many people have lost, they could not open their business, so they have closed their businesses, their livelihood. Most countries do put in some measures to help people and to help to rejuvenate the economy. But a UNDP study showed that for low and middle income countries, they are only spending something like less than $10 per capita compared to about 10 times that in high income economies. And then we know for COVID-19, the preventive measures are social distancing, we have to wear face masks, we have to self-isolate, we have to wash our hands, and they think when we have a vaccine, we will be safe. So the sector which is involved with water is hand washing. And now we are told we must wash our hands for 20 seconds. So before this, I think most of us don't wash our hands for more than 5 seconds. I remember when I was small, my mother would scold me if I wash my hands for 20 seconds. So not only are we washing it for a longer time, we are washing it more frequently. So there is going to be a bigger demand on water. So to me, the immediate challenge in the age of COVID-19 is, first, countries and in the developing countries, they have most of their resources have been depleted in fighting the COVID pandemic. The economy is going to take some time to recover, and in the meantime, they are not going to get revenue from taxation. And so their budgets for operating and maintenance and even for new water infrastructure will be cut in most countries in the Asia-Pacific region. At the same time, the population, especially low and middle income group, has got a very big cut in their income. I know of many people, those who are fortunate to still have jobs, the companies are doing pay cuts because the business are not running well. Right? At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to use more water because washing our hands with soap seems to be the only way for us to prevent us from spreading COVID-19. Right? So if the countries are in problem, we are now looking at the development banks and at the aid agencies to cover this gap in funding. So I like to thank ADB, because in the ADB presentation, I see that there's a lot of emphasis now on WASH program, but I didn't see a figure. I saw a figure of 20 billion for DRR, but I couldn't see anything on the WASH program. Also, I'd like to thank COECA, because COECA has also got a very strong area in water. I think 6% of COECA's aid goes into the water sector. Right. So there is a need for me, especially development banks and aid agencies. We need to enhance and we need to bring forward the WASH program. Right. Many people think once we have a vaccine, we will solve the problem. My thinking is, even when we have a vaccine, the poor people, the vulnerable people will still not be able to have access to the vaccine. Right? So we are at a place where this area, many countries still need a lot of assistance. And just like at the start of the COVID, even for Malaysia, China gave us some aid in terms of ventilators. And I know South Korea, it gave us some aid in terms of the testing kits. So now is the time where the development banks and the aid agencies need to increase their programs on WASH, because this is going to be very, very important. And not just for the next 2 years, but it will at the same time bring these countries to be able to meet their SDG program. So my question would be towards the ADB, COECA, and possibly even UNDP, because UNDP talks about 3 billion people who don't have access for water for washing their hands. So can we have more programs? Can we put more emphasis on this in the immediate period? So with that, I'd like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on this.
Thank you, Dr. Casero. You already summarized and wrapped up of our session for all the presentation. Thank you. And Ms. Yolanda Gomez, floor is yours.
Okay, but I think this is a very fruitful afternoon. All the presenters able to give a very clear presentation of their topics, and I thank Dr. Casero for saying it all. Yes, summarize the whole thing. So the only thing I want to add is that, you know, COVID-19 really has brought us to a new normal, I would say. In the Philippines, everybody is trying to shift our behavior to adjust to this one. But personally, I don't think that COVID-19, even with the vaccine, will go away. It's just like the common cold, it's here. But I think the critical issue here is information, data or information, because this, as the medical sector is saying, we really have not understood how it moves. And even as we speak today, I think the virus is transforming itself. So we really have to be ready. And for countries like the Philippines, where, you know, disaster is not foreign for us, but with COVID-19, it's becoming more difficult. Like just yesterday, we have a typhoon right at the moment. And in the place where I live, I saw the new normal in terms of the evacuation things. So information, data and information, science-based information is very important, especially when we talk about disasters and coping with water-related disasters. In the place where I live, yesterday, the new normal is very different from how people evacuate. You have to go through getting temperature, all those things. But the good thing is, I think slowly, people are adapting to this one. We cannot get away from COVID-19. And the other thing is about, because of the new normal, we become more and more reliant to to modern technologies, to the internet and all these things. And for us, and for me personally, my issue is connectivity. The infrastructure is there, but it's not that modern, and we really have to cope with. If I have a meeting, I'm always stressed because I don't know if I'm be able to participate or not because of connectivity. So these are the things I think that needs also to be done. And at the end of the day, we really have to change our perspective to shift into a new paradigm at looking at water, climate, and disaster as one big thing, and not work in silos as, you know, the traditional way people behave. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Yuli. So yeah, I'll invite Dr. Hong.
Thank you, Irene. Oh, well, as we know that the COVID-19 pandemic has gravely affected the countries all over the world, and socially and economically. In the current COVID-19 environment, immediate attentions of the national leaders and governments and people in the world have been focused on mitigating COVID-19 infection and treating those who become ill. But the threats of the water-related disasters remain as imminent now as before COVID-19. So many people around the world have been affected, and thousands of people lost their lives due to water-related disasters, which are increasingly frequently with the impact of various global issues such as urbanization and the climate change. So even we are under the situation of COVID-19 pandemic, the water disaster is also that threatened human life. So I'd like skip all my the comments about this kind of agenda, but I'd like to focus just one sentence, one paragraph. So the implementation of a disaster risk reduction strategy with this mechanism of global crisis is in mind is very essential to protect the disaster affected area from becoming epicenter of a pandemic explosion and swiftly recover from the disasters. It's very important, as Dr. Ono explained during the Japan flood this summer. So therefore, it is very vital to raise awareness and share the experience and the good practice with the practical guidance among the leaders. So disaster risk reduction and the COVID-19 managers and all the stakeholders to cope with these challenges by the co-occurring disasters and mitigate their impact. So very practically, I really appreciate Dr. Ono's sharing your experience for this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hong, for your valuable comments. So now 10 minutes have passed, and if you have something really most important question you have, you can turn on your mic and then ask to presenters or panelists. No, it's good. Okay, thank you for joining this session. It was really comprehensive and valuable session from all of your inputs and your comments and sharing. And I'll send you thank you mail. And then if you need something more information, we can we can share and we can keep in touch. Thank you.